From what I can read from Richard's biography, he's another leader who leads, who just goes out and does it, and very impressed, Richard. So welcome to Christchurch and New Zealand. I'd like to introduce Councillor Richard Foster from Melbourne.
Well, good morning everyone, and thanks very much for having me over here in New Zealand. It's actually my first time to New Zealand, and I understand you're coming out of your fairly cold winter as we are in Melbourne. If you have any intention of changing Prime Ministers anytime soon, that would make me feel even more familiar here. I'm going to talk to you today about some of the smoke-free initiatives that we've been implementing in Melbourne. Many of them are world-first initiatives, and I encourage you to think about some questions for me. I'm going to get through what looks to me to be a fairly lengthy presentation as quickly as I can in order to give some time back to you guys at the end of this. So I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about Melbourne. Melbourne experienced outstanding progress since the 1980s. It's what we used to refer to as a donut city. People used to come into the city to work, but didn't tend to socialise there much, didn't tend to live there in the centre of the city all that much. Life really existed in the suburbs, unless you're in the city 9 to 5. Even as a kid in the 70s and 80s, I remember people would get on the train, go to work, come home again. Nobody spent any time in the city. But boy, how things have changed. The city is very, very much activated today. It is a hive of activity, and people do like to spend time there. Not just to work, but to socialise and, of course, to live. We now have 60,000 residents in the inner city. The centre of the CBD since the early 90s has actually doubled. So life is very different now in the centre of Melbourne, and there are things we need to do to accommodate that life, but also to encourage it and to encourage that activity to continue to be developed in the central city. Of course, one of our major priorities in the city is the health of our community. And with the growing population that we have moving around our streets and laneways and arcades, taking advantage of al fresco dining, passive smoking has become a major issue to us as well. The central city has around 800 cafes, restaurants and bars with outdoor eating and drinking areas, providing a total of around 24,000 outdoor seats. After pubs, restaurants and clubs were legislated as smoke-free venues in 2001, strangely enough, the sky didn't fall in as they predicted it would. And I know this has been spoken about earlier today. I'm going to speak a little bit more about that too. Asking smokers to refrain or step outside for a cigarette didn't cause the hotel industry to fold after all. The change has been refreshing and not only accepted but embraced by the whole community. Now, this may look a little bit familiar to you, but so would that. That's the MCG, the Melbourne Cricket Ground, that sits just adjacent to the CBD in Melbourne. It's one train stop away if you haven't been there. It has a capacity of 100,000 people, and it's been an outdoor smoke-free venue since 1999. Again, record crowds continue to be set every year at the MCG with our sporting events. People seem to respect that children and people with health issues especially need to feel safe at sporting venues. A sporting venue is no place for cigarette smoking. If we can't understand the mixed messaging of that by now, I don't think we're ever going to. And of course, the rest of the community prefers to enjoy events in fresh air anyway. So with smoke-free entries to buildings, children's playgrounds and workplaces, smoke-free outdoor dining areas shouldn't have been considered to be a major jolt to the community. Indeed, I think there is some acceptance that there is an inevitability about it. The protection of the community from passive smoking by expanding smoke-free areas is now a 4-year priority of the City of Melbourne and ultimately, of course, aims to improve the quality of life for everyone in Melbourne, not just its residents, but its visitors and its workers as well. So I'd like to talk you through a bit about how this all happened and give you an overview of how smoke-free spaces came about in Melbourne. Look, in short, I was saying to Glenn earlier, in short, I had a sudden rush of blood to the head in February 2013, and I went to one of the major papers in Melbourne after having had a conversation with some officers internally and said that I thought that a citywide ban on smoking was a good idea. Well, it got a little bit of attention. It ran on the front page for a couple of days, and it generated, I think I did 17 media interviews that day, from not just across the country, but from around the world. Suddenly everybody was looking at Melbourne as a city that was going to be genuinely smoke-free. Since then, in fact, fairly rapidly, by May 2013, we'd partnered with the Anti-Cancer Council of Victoria and Quit Victoria, the two major anti-smoking movements locally. And we moved towards implementing progressive smoke-free areas in city laneways. At that point, there were no Victorian bans on smoking in outdoor dining areas. That is about to change. The state government has only just announced its commitment to ban smoking in outdoor dining areas by August 2017. I should emphasise that Victoria is the last state in Australia to do that. I think there are various reasons why that's the case, but we've gotten there in the end. But prior to that ban that was announced just a couple of weeks ago, we were implementing smoke-free areas across Melbourne since 2013. I think the key to creating workable smoke-free areas isn't just legislation or enforcement, but collaboration with businesses and the community, and gradual but steady behavioural change. This does take momentum. I've never taken the view that it's a great idea to demonise smokers, but understand instead that helping everyone providing smoke-free environments is a positive move to decrease passive smoking and allow people to breathe easy. And that is a message that we used instead of using the prohibition on smoking signs, the big red circles with the line through it. We had the messaging that said breathe easy, and you'll see a little bit of that later in the presentation. While smoking isn't illegal, secondhand smoke is obviously problematic to the health of the community, particularly for children and young people and for those with compromised health. So we can highlight the positive effect on smoke-free areas this way and the effect that they have on the community by continuing to ensure that areas are smoke-free and promoting these areas as great places for people to be, to work and to enjoy themselves. The smoke-free area signs do not, as parking signs often do, state a punishment in the shape of a fine for non-compliance. They merely indicate that the area is smoke-free. You'll see one of these in a moment when I move to the first smoke-free area. The negative effect smoking has, not only on health, but also the general enjoyment of public spaces is well documented. In fact, when we looked, and we did a very, very quick search just the other day for evidence that passive smoke harms you, and without looking too far, we found 21 distinctly different reports with evidence in them that passive smoke causes medical harm. It should no longer be a debate. Now, occasionally you do have a debate about that, but if a quick search gives you 21 different pieces of evidence as to why passive smoke is harmful, I don't think we need look too much further. The challenge of implementing policy like this lies, though, in ensuring that businesses and the community as a whole see this as a good thing. So the messaging is overwhelmingly important. So let's move to the Causeway. The Causeway is a laneway in the central city, and as you can see, it's populated heavily by cafes and outdoor eating areas. I'm going to say that this slide is a little bit misleading because I can't remember the last time I saw that much sunshine in the Causeway, but it doesn't tend to stop people from going there. In 2013, we trialled a smoke-free area for a period of 6 months in this place under the Council's Activities Local Law. These are the bylaws that we can implement as a local government authority. There are a number of objectives to local laws that are required by state legislation that we meet. Look, the long and the short of it is that smoke-free areas comply pretty easily. An extensive evaluation was conducted during that 6-month trial, and it showed overwhelming support from both businesses in the laneway and the community as a whole for a smoking ban, and as a result the area was permanently prescribed as smoke-free, Melbourne's first smoke-free space in 2014. There's 19 businesses in the Causeway. 11 of those are outdoor eating or dining venues. One of those businesses objected to the smoke-free trial and the subsequent ban. The others all reported increases in their takings after the trial. Now that's remarkable. That's remarkable. And when I asked why that was, I said, what was it that generated the increase? Was it? I would have thought that yes, certain people might move out of the Causeway if it's smoke-free, but who was coming in? The answer, perhaps unsurprisingly, was families. Families were coming in, and they were sitting down, and instead of someone sitting on a cup of coffee for half an hour, and smoking 10 cigarettes, they were sitting down and ordering 4 meals, and then turning the table over to another family. So perhaps it shouldn't be that surprising at all that there was a genuine increase in takings from these businesses. I'll speak just briefly about the one business that wasn't so happy. It was a cafe up the other end of where this shot was taken. And it sits on the corner of the Burke Street Mall, which is a major retail area in Melbourne, for those who haven't been. The cafe serviced a lot of the retail workers that were coming out of the large department stores that occupy the Bourke Street Mall, and they were complaining that people were no longer coming in to get their coffees on their cigarette break in the morning and afternoon. Well, I stood down there at 10:30 one morning, and I stood there for an hour just to watch what would happen when retail workers were coming in and out. Well, it turns out the retail workers were coming in all right, and they were going back out again, and yes, they were having a cigarette around the corner in the Bourke Street Mall instead of in the Causeway. And what were they standing there with? It wasn't just a cigarette in one hand. In the other hand, it was a takeaway coffee. So they hadn't actually stopped going to the cafe. They hadn't actually stopped drinking their coffee. They just weren't sitting there anymore. They were walking around and freeing the space up. And I still don't understand how the takings dropped that much when you were simply moving from a sit-down coffee to a takeaway one. Nonetheless, the other businesses benefited overwhelmingly, and it doesn't seem to be much cause for debate now. Of course, we've moved on a bit since then. One of the key aspects, though, of implementing the smoke-free bans is the need for consultation. Now, it is required under the state legislation, pursuant to which we implement our local laws, but that isn't the only reason that we do it. Obviously, we have to do it. But extensive consultation has actually proven to be one of the key factors in the success of the smoke-free zones around Melbourne. People feel as if they have an ownership of the plan. People feel as if they are directly involved, and it's because they are directly involved. They are actually having a say in how this is going to work, and we're required to listen to that. We're required to evidence that we have taken on board the results of the public consultation. I'll talk about the results as well. The messaging that we used in the Causeway, that we trialled in the Causeway, was this, and as you can see, the slogan there is "Breathe Easy." The no smoking symbol only appears as a watermark in the background. It is an essential piece of the messaging. I'll give you an example of how that messaging's been used elsewhere in Melbourne. I've got a friend who lives in one of the outer suburbs, and I went out to lunch with her just a few weeks ago around the corner from where she lived. I live in the inner city, and the outer suburbs isn't somewhere I generally do my shopping, but we went to one of her local shopping malls. So it's a new suburb. The shopping mall is new, and it opened with a lot of sort of pedestrian space, outdoor pedestrian space cutting through the big shopping complex, and it was opened as a smoke-free area. To indicate that it's a smoke-free area, those red circles, those no smoking signs, are screen printed all over the pathways and all over the walls, letting you know that you're a really naughty person if you go smoking in a place like this. When I was walking through there and I saw these signs, and I should confess too, that I've also been a smoker in a former life. And my mind harked back to when I was smoking. I was walking around seeing these signs, and I thought, you know what that says? That says you're a real bastard if you want to smoke. And I thought, no wonder. You know, I'm walking down there and I'm seeing people stand along the walls and around the corners, and they're all absolutely disregarding the smoke-free area. You know, I must have sighted a dozen smokers in a very short space of walking through there, and I thought, see, this really isn't working at all. And I thought, so why do our areas work and this doesn't? And I thought, it's got to be the signage. People don't like being told that they're being naughty and they're doing the wrong thing and that they're risking a fine. Especially when smoking is still legal, like it or not, it is. And yes, I do maintain that people do have a right to smoke. They don't necessarily have a right to impact others with it, but they do have a right to smoke. If they choose to smoke, though, and they're being told not to, and the law says that they can, they start disregarding this sort of thing. If the message, though, is this is a good thing, and you can be a part of a good thing, and if you do want to have a smoke, that's okay, but, you know, it's best you don't do it here, people are far more likely to comply. And the evidence of all of that is in the central city smoke-free zones. Because with this messaging, we haven't yet had to issue one fine for non-compliance. Not one. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but when people are told it's a smoke-free area, they happily move on. We haven't had any issues yet of serious non-compliance. So back to why we chose the Causeway. Look, obviously it's a high pedestrian traffic area. It's a high-profile location, and again, it's dominated heavily by outdoor dining areas, and one of the messages that we wanted to send initially with this plan was to the state government to encourage them to implement smoke-free outdoor dining across the state, which of course they have now committed to. The budget for implementing the first smoke-free area was in the order of $30,000. It wasn't what we would regard as a significant spend for an outcome of this type. We now have an annual budget for implementing smoke-free areas of around $380,000. And again, that is to implement areas, as Council agrees, over a 12-month period, and it's a rolling budget. So again, not what we would regard as a significant spend, especially for the outcomes that we get from it. This is another one of the smoke-free areas. This is Howie Place. Again, the similar messaging was used. I don't know if you can quite see it there, but it's a fairly enclosed area. It's what we'd regard as a semi-enclosed area. So like the causeway, these were already issues. There was already a condensation of food vapour. On a hot day, it's probably not that comfortable. The one thing that makes it worse is cigarette smoke. So it seemed logical to start there and start clearing it out. And those are the sorts of areas that we started with. We also did other work through these laneways to assist business. We did go through a beautification project. We put more planter boxes in, made businesses feel better about their space and better about what we were doing. It also encouraged people to those areas and promoted them actively as smoke-free zones. Yes, you can breathe easy there, but it's actually a nice place to be anyway. The evaluation involved monthly compliance checks and litter observations at different times. So this is something we had to focus on heavily as well. We had to be sure ourselves that it was working before we just promoted that it was working. Lo and behold, it was working. The findings of the evaluations that we conducted are significant. So some 80% of patrons and passers-by all supported the smoking bans. 82% supported smoking bans in general within the municipality. So it's around the same. Now, it's probably not that surprising when you think that 88% of Australians don't smoke. It's similar to the rate of smoking in New Zealand. 88% don't smoke. So you would expect upwards of 80% support, and that's exactly what we got. We also found that actually 41% of people said that they're more likely to go to a smoke-free area. So that was significant as well. And again, when you're dealing with businesses on this front, no one can blame a business for being a bit sensitive about what their takings are likely to be and what the hit on revenue is likely to be. But it's pretty easy to inspire them with confidence when you start quoting figures like that. And when you point towards areas like this with businesses that are all benefiting from smoke-free environments. So the next step, I'm just going to take you through some of these slides. They're really just some indicators of where the initial smoke-free areas have been. This is Block Place again. As you can see, very similar. You know, there's outdoor awnings that are providing that encasement of the area. It varies when they're out. Melbourne isn't prone to that much rain, as you know. They're out most of the time. This is Goldsborough Lane. There's more retail space in Goldsborough Lane, as you can see. Here's where we're moving on. We're not just talking about smoke-free outdoor dining anymore. We're talking about smoke-free spaces that include a range of businesses. It goes to the idea of denormalising smoking. Smoking, when you've got 88% of the population that doesn't do it, isn't actually that normal. And it's time that we started saying to people, well, you know what? With the majority of the populace not engaging in smoking activity, you deserve to have smoke-free spaces wherever you may be. Again, smokers do have a right to smoke, and there will always, whilst that remains the case, there should always be places for them to do that. But they need to be appropriate places where the majority of the population isn't going to be impacted by dangerous passive smoke. This is the QV Centre again. This is a heavily retail-focused space. This is actually this QV space occupies an entire CBD block. This was the first actual CBD block that was prescribed as a smoke-free zone. The City Square. Again, the first outdoor open space. It's a space used for events. As well as with the hospitality venues you can see on the left-hand side there. There's actually a coffee shop just beyond that grass area there, a cafe beyond that grass area there at the back where the red umbrellas are. That's actually been voluntarily smoke-free for the last 3 or 4 years. The bars and restaurants down the left-hand side are now have just been prescribed as smoke-free as a part of that entire space. Interestingly, when it comes to engagement, and this is important, when it comes to community engagement, the City of Melbourne won a global award last year for being the best at community engagement. This is one of the reasons why we haven't locked the community out of being a part of this process. It's important that the community are involved in this process. It's important that we take the community with us. And that's why that Breathe Easy message is so important. Reminding the community that it's actually in their interests that we're doing this is vital. So businesses benefit from it. The community benefits from it. The surveys are overwhelmingly in favour of it. It's pretty hard, or it's getting harder, to find good reasons not to do something like this. This is part of the analysis we did. I don't know why you'd want a slide like this in a presentation. It looks like a lot to read, doesn't it? Nonetheless, you can see that we did a stakeholder analysis, yeah? Good. This slide is somewhat misleading but very telling. This is called the Fitzroy Gardens. Again, an event space that is smoke-free. I say misleading because, as you can see, there's a lot of people dancing here, and yes, we do like dancing in Melbourne. But if you look closely, it kind of indicates that there's no Melburnian that actually knows how to dance, because when you look, everybody's looking at their feet, and I can't dance to save myself, and that's exactly what I do. Nonetheless, I assure you there are good dancers in Melbourne. I'm sure that a lot of them don't smoke, and as you can see in this slide, nobody is because it is a smoke-free event space. Again, it has brought families back to a lot of events. It makes a lot of sense because you would regard parks and gardens as being family-oriented anyway. You would want to encourage kids to enjoy your parks and gardens. Parks and gardens are generally smoke-free in Melbourne, but not with every event. Well, they are. They are now. If you want to have an event in the prescribed parks and gardens in Melbourne, it now needs to be smoke-free. I think it's pretty good. That's bringing us to an end of the slides. One thing I'd just like to conclude with is I get asked a lot how you deal with media and how you deal with the tobacco industry. I think the media is a big conversation. I'm very happy to have that, but I wanted to bring you in on something I saw from the tobacco industry just the other day. And I read this on the plane on the way over. I hadn't actually read the full report. This is I'm just going to read a paragraph of it. This comes from a submission to the Economics References Committee inquiry into the economic and social impact of legislation, policies or Commonwealth guidelines. Suppose I didn't fall asleep at that point. It's dated the 24th of August 2015. Its author is Imperial Tobacco. And it's obviously in relation to tobacco regulation. Now I love these things. Get this. This is directly from their report, right? The environmental tobacco smoke, or ETS, also known as second-hand smoke, is the aged and diluted combination of the smoke rising from the lit end of a cigarette and the smoke exhaled by the smoker into the ambient air. Public health authorities worldwide have concluded that ETS is a cause of smoking-related diseases in non-smokers. The public would be guided by the conclusions of those public health authorities regarding ETS. Adults who smoke should show consideration and courtesy to other people, and in particular should exercise care to avoid smoking around children. This is from the tobacco industry. From the tobacco industry. It's hard to believe, I know, but among the other spurious claims in that report, and some of them are pearlers too, things like adults have the right to choose to smoke and all that sort of thing. Yes, well, arguably so. Doesn't talk a lot about 14-year-olds choosing to smoke and the candy-flavoured e-cigarettes and all that stuff. But those are curiously omitted facts. But that is an absolute pearler, conceding that passive smoke is harmful. The tobacco industry itself. Now, when you've got that from the tobacco industry, why would you be worried about them? The tobacco industry in Australia had $1.7 billion ripped out of it in investment money over the last 2 years. This is an industry in this part of the world that's on its knees. It is struggling to retain a foothold in the deadly conduct that it's been engaging in over the decades. It's struggling to hold on. It's struggling to do anything it can to remain relevant and to remain profitable. So of course it's not going to like things like this, but it is getting very careful about the sorts of messages it sends to government. I've had no approaches from the tobacco industry. I've had no engagement from them, but equally I've had no threats from them either. Now let's not forget that Australia's in the World Court at the moment at the suit of the tobacco industry through the Ukraine. Now the Ukraine's taken us to court for our plain packaging legislation that was introduced a few years ago by the then Labor government. We're still in the World Court fighting that today. Why would you choose the Ukraine? Well, it's a big tobacco producer. And you need to be a state to take action in the World Court. So the tobacco industry needed somebody to do their dirty work for them, and they found the Ukraine to do it. Now, thankfully, the Australian government, from both sides of politics, has committed to continuing that fight. So I'm pleased that we'll be continuing to contest that. But locally, the tobacco industry isn't looking for protections against passive smoke or implementing more passive smoke-free areas. It seems to be turning a blind eye to it. It's nothing I would worry about. In terms of media, again, it's probably a larger conversation, but the media messaging is important. Again, highlighting that people want what you're doing, highlighting that businesses are not suffering for it. In fact, they are benefiting from it. Again, it makes the arguments against introducing smoke-free areas increasingly difficult to maintain. I hope I've gone quickly enough, and perhaps we've got time for a couple of questions. Good, thanks.